So, what is autism?
How do we answer a question that has so far been defined by excluding the lived experiences of autistic people? One way to understand autism is by hearing autistic voices.
I feel currently it's in boxes.
What do you mean by a box, Arshi?
Matlab, it is defined according to a restricted clinical definition. We try to fit one definition to all autistic people. We look at autism through a checklist. Like a person has to fit in to get a diagnosis. For example, social communication. The clinician needs to see impairment in that aspect. But the clinician may be unaware that the person in front may be camouflaging or masking. That's why many girls don't get a diagnosis of autism when they're young. But we need to understand that it's a spectrum.
Let's visualize the spectrum like this. When you imagine a spectrum, you're probably seeing a line or a rainbow, but what we want you to imagine is a pie chart where there are 1,000 different colors all merged together. And on this pie chart, all of us lie. वो सारे colors में maybe I have less blue and more of green, and somebody else has all the colors in equal proportions. Maybe you have a little bit of red and a little bit of green, and maybe the person next to you is a mix of all these things and all those things. If you relate these colors to the boxes, one of those boxes might be social communication, another might be sensory sensitivities or personal relationships, etc.
Astha, you're right. Our being is inside a spectrum. Autism is our identity. But since the time the concept of autism has existed, it has been defined by people watching our behaviors from the outside and trying to make meaning of those behaviors. Anecdotal records have always shown, and research has just begun to show, that these externally derived meanings are far from our lived experiences. So, I think it's very important to understand that each autistic person might define their autism uniquely. And there is no way to know what autism is unless we listen to autistic people and understand their individual perspectives.
Absolutely. And autistic people are now coming out and saying that, hey, how you're imagining my behavior to me, it's actually quite different from what I've heard. That's why rather than define for our audience what autism is, I think we should go ahead and listen to the perspectives of various autistic guest speakers over the next few episodes on our show and understand what different autisms mean for different people.
I agree with what you're saying, Astha. When I started my career, it was more about what I wanted from a child rather than what does the child need. And because of that, a lot of times there were kids who were not diagnosed with autism and they were left out. They didn't get the kind of support that they needed. I clearly remember an 11-year-old when I look back. He was on the spectrum, but his diagnosis was not autism. He still hasn't got that support that he needs. We are still taking baby steps when we are trying to define autism. I feel the mental health professional community should extend their hand towards the autistic community and help each other understand. Asta, have you also had this experience?
Sounds very familiar. मेरे experience में what has happened is that okay, you want to work with autistic people, here is a set of rules and guidelines. तुम्हें ऐसे ही काम करना पड़ेगा और कोई ऑप्शन नहीं है तुम्हारे पास. एंड अगर वो स्पेस क्रिएट करने की कोशिश करोगे तो you will not find any support in the system. So how it turns out is that in India, behaviorist approaches will be propagated because you don't have the space to oppose them, even if your training says otherwise, even if you want to do something different. So that's what I struggle with, which also in turn makes fighting for this just as important.
I would like to add that these rules and guidelines, especially early in practice, I felt if you go away from these rules and guidelines, it was scary. What will happen if I jump the line? Am I going to harm the child? Am I going to harm whatever I have done with the child so far? Kuch galat ho gaya to. It was a terrifying feeling, as if you're dealing with someone who has come from another space altogether.
Interesting, because that speaks very closely to the autistic experience. That this terror that professionals experience is the same that autistic people experience every day, that we are deviating from the norm. And somehow the system is such that you are not allowed to do that. That is where the structure falls apart. That is where discrimination comes in. That is where stigma comes in. And that is where our practices become more restricted. which is also why autistic people spend their whole lives trying to fit in.
You know what you said just now reminds me of a story. Jungle Book mein, Mowgli was brought up by a pack of wolves. There's one scene where the animals go to the river to drink water, and Mowgli uses a coconut shell as a cup to drink water from. His wolf mother, Ami, scolds him. ऐसे कोई पानी पीता है? Look at your brothers and sisters. Lap up your water. This way, Ami and the pack try to teach Mowgli how to be a good wolf. In the process, Mowgli grows up to be an underconfident, angry, confused child. He runs away from home also. And there one day he finds the bear Bhalu, who tells him he is a man cub. Mowgli is shocked. Am I a man cub? Bhalu says, yeah. Why are you trying to be a wolf cub? Okay, never mind. Get me honey from that tree. And Mowgli builds a scaffold system. Bhalu protects him from evil monkeys. This way, Bhalu and Mowgli form a relationship based on mutual giving, based on each other's strengths. When it is time to fight the bully Sher Khan the tiger, Ami is forced to accept that although Mowgli is her baby, he is a man cub. So the forest starts harnessing each other's strengths and supporting each other in their weaknesses. And Sher Khan, who had been a menace for many years, is finally defeated because of this.